Thank you very much. For many of us in this room, our opinions have probably already been forged on Syria, and no matter on which side of the scale you stand, today the presentation I give will be with respect to the recent chemical attacks in Syria and some of the legalities with respect to that. It won't be a legal lecture. I am a lawyer by profession, but we won't go into the law. But it'll be more of a presentation that I think appeals to common sense. So, if we understand in general terms the concept of justice, what is justice? Fair go. It's a fair go. Good point. You know, if we were to say that a person is just, then we would say that that person is probably impartial, somebody who is fair and reasonable. But the concept of justice is not just what we think justice is, it's also the administration of justice. And the speakers before me, especially Susie, when you put the scale of the Lady of Justice, we expect that the process that leads to justice is fair and reasonable and impartial. If somebody were, to give an example, to be arrested by the New South Wales Police here in Sydney or the Australian Federal Police and to be accused of a crime, and if that person was then told by the police, we think you did it, we're not going to investigate that crime, we're not going to try you for that crime, but we're going to put you in prison for 10 years because we know, or we have no doubt that you committed that crime. What would be the social implication? How would we feel as a society if that was the way that we were governed, or the administration of the laws in Australia were in that way? Now I bring these issues up because I want you to think about the concept of justice, and I'm talking about now a little bit about the burden of proof. As I said, it's not a legal lecture, but for those who don't understand the burden of proof or the standard of proof, I focus specifically on Australia. I haven't touched on the international realm, and I know Susie spoke about it. It's quite complex, and that's a completely different discussion at another time. But I focus on these Australian and American jurisdictions and the concept of what the burden of proof or standard of proof is within Australia and within the United States. So the burden of proof is basically a duty upon a party, and it's typically the party that asserts a proposition to prove that proposition beyond a standard. And that standard in a criminal jurisdiction, whether it's in Australia or the United States, is beyond a reasonable doubt. Further to that, the opposing party, so the defendant in any criminal case, is entitled to what we call a presumption of innocence. Which means what? Which means that the burden on the prosecution is a lot higher because the defendant is automatically assumed to be innocent. Now remember that concept, because we're going to go through a few things now in the court of public opinion, as I say, because that presumption of innocence unfortunately does not exist. And the speakers before me have done a great job in highlighting some of the reasons as to why that presumption has been removed and why the burden in the court of public opinion doesn't exist. So the US narrative with respect to the recent chemical attacks. What do we know? And we hear this over and over again, and as I said, the speakers before did a great job with highlighting Western media propaganda. Assad is a brutal dictator, he's a despot, he's a tyrant. And by the way, for those that think he's a dictator, please look up the dictionary meaning of dictator and then take a look at the process in Syria and how Bashar al-Assad actually was given power. So there's a bit of an issue in that in itself. So we know from the US narrative that the US alleges the Syrian Air Force dropped chemical weapons, most likely sarin gas, in Khan Sheikhoun on the 4th of April in 2007. The narrative then says 74 people died and some 557 people were injured. The US says there is no doubt that according to US intelligence, that it bears the hallmarks of the Syrian regime. Now, we're going to go into the narrative in a little bit, but I just want to take this opportunity right now to commend each and every one of you for being here, and each and every speaker that has spoken before me, and in particular Dr. Tim Anderson, for bringing us together, because if this goes unchallenged, and not just this, but every narrative that's put forward to the public, if it goes unchallenged, then it becomes the conventional norm. People accept it as the truth, and it must be corrected for the sake of justice and for the sake of truth. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you. In a legal sense, if we any lawyer or any person that is legally minded, if you're going to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt, then you need to have a motive. There needs to be some sort of a guilty mind, a mens rea, whatever legal term you want to throw around. There needs to be something that drives a person to commit whatever action they committed. So let's talk about motive. The US released a 4-page report, which we'll go into a little bit later, but it doesn't specify a motive why they think the Syrian government would have committed this crime. Now, we know the facts are on the ground. The Syrian government, the Syrian army, had taken back land over the last 12 months. They were in a great position militarily speaking. Politically, we know, and I'll show you in a little bit, the United States government had even changed their tune up until the 1st of April, where they had made public comments stating that the Syrian government, or the oust of Assad, was no longer a US foreign policy initiative. So, if you are in control of the war, if you're ahead on the battlefield, if you're doing this using conventional weapons, if your greatest threat, internationally speaking, has changed its tune and said you can now stay in power, and here's a thought, the Syrian people can decide if you remain in your seat or not. Why in the world would any person in that position launch a chemical attack? It doesn't make sense. And I challenge any question to come forward with a person. There's absolutely no logic in that. He may as well have picked up a gun, put it to his head and pulled the trigger. That's my honest opinion. Because it is political and military suicide. It does not make sense. So who then benefits? Is the next question. If we talk about motive, who can benefit from such an attack? Well, we know there's people calling for no-fly zones. We know that there's people who are itching at the US and its allies becoming involved for the sole purpose of taking out the Syrian airfields or the Syrian aircraft, the weapons that are essentially helping the Syrian government win the war. One more point, and it's the last point there. Mr. Trump, pre the strike on Syria, his approval rating, according to Gallup, 35%. One of the lowest approval ratings in US presidential history for a president less than 100 days in power. 35%. He strikes the Syrian airfields. Does anybody know what the approval rating goes up to? 50%. 50%. It won't be long before it comes back down, but God help North Korea, Syria, who else is in? I don't know what his thoughts are. So who benefits? There's a couple of quotes, and these are, I'm happy for anybody to take them down, exactly as they are. I think the longer term status of President Assad will be decided by the Syrian people. What a great concept. The people within a constituency deciding their own leader. Wow. Yeah. Now one more thing. We talk about motive. And I put this up. This is from the 12th of April. So a few days after the alleged attack. The Syrian army, you can see in red, had taken vast amounts of land back from the armed insurgents or the terrorists. The bit in the top left corner is where Idlib province is. There is no military, and I challenge any expert, military expert or war historian, to show me what the what the benefit of a chemical weapons attack in Idlib does for a military. Absolutely no benefit. None whatsoever. We'd retaken Aleppo, he'd retaken Homs, he'd retaken the more important areas of Syria. If you're going to talk about going to a political process and negotiating at a table, then he had the big cards in his hand. He had the ace of spades, the ace of hearts, the ace of diamonds, the ace of clubs. He didn't need the three of hearts. So let's talk about evidence. I love this because from somebody, and I'm going to put my legal hat aside, and this is where I want everybody to get involved. Because as a human being, we should use what we have, what differentiates us from other mammals, and that's that we have logic and reason. We have the ability to communicate with each other. We have a brain. So the US released a 4-page report, 11th of April, citing open source information, essentially social media and YouTube, as evidence that the Syrian government attacked Khan Shaykhun with chemical weapons. The US then relies upon its intelligence assessment, and please understand this point, that rebels do not possess the capability to carry out such an attack. So therefore, it is highly likely it was the Syrian government. Because they can't do it, the Syrian government must have done it. That's their logic. Then, the US government says, we rely upon other instances. And we're going to get to that in a second. The US then claims that it was a sustained attack from the air. Now please, apply some logic here. You have an air force dropping canisters or munitions of chemical weapons from the air. The photo evidence the United States released will show one munition. 74 people dead, 557 injured. Now, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not an expert in chemical warfare. But if you drop a few hundred bombs from the sky carrying chemical munitions, I can pretty confidently say that the casualty toll would be far greater than 74 dead and 557 civilians. I can also say that the probability that there would be more than one munition found would be far greater had that been the case. The last point in their narrative is, or in the report, is we have other evidence, but we can't tell you about it. It exists.
WND.
Exactly. Yeah. But you can't know about it. Exactly. So, let's talk about Syria and some of this evidence. We know that the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in 2016, 4th of January, released a report where they said that the declared arsenal that had been given to them by the Syrian government was destroyed by an American company. Now, for the record, some people out there say that they didn't declare everything and they still have some chemical weapons. No problem. Let's run with that narrative. Does anybody know if the United States has handed over or destroyed its chemical weapon arsenal? No? They still hold, they are still in possession of more than 10% of their declared arsenal. And for the record, so nobody says that I'm biased, so does Russia. Okay? 10%. So the United States points the finger and says, you're a bad guy, you can't have chemical weapons, you must destroy them, but we can hold on to 10% of ours, just in case. Debunking the report. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, and I'll put some excerpts there from Dr. Theodore Postel, who I think is an amazing man. He released within hours, and if you read his reply, it's something that he put together in a short amount of time, and I'm sure he'll come up with something a little bit more detailed. But for those of you who don't know Dr. Postel, he's obviously a professor at the MIT University in the States, and he makes the assessment quite clearly that the evidence the United States presented can't be relied upon. Rebel capacity. Remember what they told us. The rebels cannot or do not possess the capability to carry out chemical attacks. That's a lie. Khan al-Assad, 2013. You don't have to believe me, read the UN report. The Syrian government was the one who initially asked the United Nations to come in and report the attack. They sent samples, the United Nations came in. They tried to creatively word the report so as not to assert blame, but then Carla Del Ponte comes out. What does she say? It's right there. Our investigations will have to be further explored, tested and proven through new evidence, but as far as we could determine at the moment, only opponents of the regime have used sarin gas. Only the opponents of the regime. But the US tells us they are not capable of using sarin gas. Independent investigation, US terminology. Syrian rebels testing chemical. I urge anybody, please, go onto YouTube, social media, in whatever search engine you use, type in Syrian rebels, chemical weapons, and you'll find material like this. Not only will you find material like that, but you'll find actual videos showing rebels testing chemicals on rabbits. Means of delivery. Here's another good one. Nikki Haley sat in the United Nations Security Council and she said, again, and remember this word because we're going to talk about it later, she said there is no doubt the Syrian government, or Syria, the regime of Bashar al-Assad perpetrated this attack, and she went on to say later, it bears all the hallmarks of the Syrian government. Now look at the statement from the UN High Representative Kim Won-soo. At the same security meeting, when it was convened, what did he say? And of course you didn't see this in the newspapers or on the news. He said the means of delivery could not be confirmed. We don't know. He said at the beginning of that evidence was still coming in, we're unable to determine. But we cannot, they could not at the time and still cannot confirm the means of delivery. And again, I put a couple of points there where we talk about a sustained attack and the numbers of claimed dead and casualties. This is from Dr. Postel's reply. Close-up photo. Now, anybody, and I urge, please, if you haven't read it, go on and have a look and read. So he shows a crater. Now that's the photo, that's the only photo the United States government has shown us to say that chemical weapons were used by the Syrian government in Khan Sheikhoun. Now Dr. Postel talks about this crater. Again, I'm not an expert, I'll let the experts' evidence do the talking, but Mr. Postel says that that is a staged photograph for the staged crater. That the crater there cannot, and he gives technical reasoning as to why that crater could not have possibly come about from a airstrike or even a munition strike. Now he also then goes on further, and you can see there where he says that if you look at the canister, it's bent from the outside in, and typically if you drop a bomb, the charging munition from the inside explodes, and you would have a different type of detonation. This shell would not resemble what it does in this photo, and basically that according to his expert evidence, that the charge was put on top, it had blown, dented the cartridge in, and released the sarin gas. Now, white helmets, how good are they?
Well, they have an Oscar.
Yeah. How good are they? When are the Oscars? Yeah, when are they coming up? Are they getting a nomination? I don't know. But anyway,
They won.
Did they?
They won short
Jesus Christ. Yeah, there you go. Wow. Shows you how into the white helmets I am. Now again, I'm not an expert on sarin gas, but from what I know, as a man again of logic and reason, from what I understand of chemical weapons, in particular sarin, it's a chemical that is not good to touch. In fact, most experts say that if you touch sarin, within seconds to a few minutes, you're probably dead. If you breathe it, you're probably going to die too.
Within 2 minutes.
There you go.
No doubt.
Right? Here we go. So these are some stills from the video footage that the US has relied upon. So I'm not saying a chemical weapon attack didn't occur. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the narrative that they're presenting is wrong. There's a lot of questions to be asked about what we're being told and the evidence we've been given. So let me make that clear. I'm not saying that there was no chemical attack, that people didn't die. And for me, one life lost to a chemical attack is one too many. It doesn't matter if it's one or if it's 1,000 or if it's 1,000,000. But what I'm hoping to show you is that the narrative presented just doesn't make sense. So here we see this guy magically breathing sarin, and here we see these guys are a little bit smarter because they have the face masks on, so they can't breathe it, but they're touching it.
The guys behind him don't have a mask.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, he doesn't have a mask on. So what I'm saying is it's logically, from what we know of sarin, there's a question mark over some of the evidence that we've been provided. Here's another one. I went through video, and I challenge anybody to go on, have a look for themselves. Were all of the dead really dead?
No.
And you're going to find, and I know I'm specifically talking about this particular attack, but anybody that goes online and has a look for themselves, you're going to find many videos from other parts of Syria where you'll find dead people magically coming back to life. And it sounds funny, I wish it was, but it's not. But you will find videos staged by rebel groups, and this is fact, and I challenge anybody to go online, any search engine you like, and put in there rebel videos exposed, white helmets exposed, whatever you want to Google, and you will see the footage for yourselves. This is a still. So you'll see in this video that he's videoing a couple of people. You see there her eyes are closed. Towards the last probably 2 seconds of the video, she opens her eyes. Now I don't know who was editing that video, but it's not a good job. But you'll see, quite clearly, it's not a good job. Alright, so absolutely, and that's the point I'm making. I know, I wish it was. I mean, it isn't a joke. But there are lots and lots of these videos, and there are lots and lots of this evidence, this proof for anyone that wants to have a look, that wants to find it, to see it. There's a lot of evidence there. Ghouta. They told you it was Assad, didn't they? It was him, the big bad guy, dropped chemical weapons, killing 1,400 civilians. The UN report says 355 people died. 355. The Americans told us through multiple media outlets, over 1,400 civilians had died. Has anybody read the UN report? 355. Not only does it say 355, the head UN inspector, Aki Selstrom, what does he say? It was not possible from their observations that the hospitals surrounding the area could have treated the number of injured or dead that the United States claimed, or the rebels had claimed at the time. Impossible. The resources, the facilities just weren't there. And when they cross-checked names against the deceased, 355. But as late as a couple of days ago, watching Fox, because I like to watch what the other guys say, they still tell us that more than 1,000 civilians died in Ghouta. Now that chemical weapon attack, again, could lay no blame on the Syrian government, nor could it lay blame on the rebels. However, and I urge people to go on, especially Seymour Hersh, Dr. Postel as well, Aki Selstrom made quite a remarkable remark after Dr. Postel had released his view on the Ghouta attack. And what was that? Dr. Postel says the munitions used in the Ghouta attack had a maximum range of 2 kilometres. Maximum range of 2 kilometres. Dr. Postel then analyses the map that the United Nations had presented as to the positional territory of the rebels and the Syrian government. Does anybody know what the closest Syrian post, or the closest government area in distance, how far it was from Ghouta? 15? Yeah, 9 kilometres. 9 kilometres. Physically impossible for a munition to have been fired, or that specific munition, or the munitions that we were told about in that report, to have been fired from a government position. Read the report. But of course they won't tell us that because Assad did it before, remember?
They relied on Elliot Higgins and Bellingcat.
Exactly right, and that was refuted. And that's why I urge people, Dr. Postel, Seymour Hersh absolutely destroyed the evidence put forward by those guys. Brilliant analysis. Now, witness for the prosecution. Someone here quoted Hitchcock before. It's a great movie as well, great book. Witness for the prosecution. Does anyone? So we showed on the map before. Idlib is totally controlled by. What do they know? What are they today? Jabhat Fatah al-Islam. I don't know. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Al-Qaeda. I don't know. Whatever name they give themselves today or tomorrow. It is not controlled by government areas. So reports, and these have been minimal, but reports saying that the Syrian government is not going to grant access to UN investigators to visit the site and conduct investigations, completely false. Because the Syrian government doesn't control the area. Right? Not only that, but I want to talk about Idlib itself. And I've given some examples there. So March 17, January 10, all this year, March 16, the United States and Russia both hit Idlib. Why? Because it is the heart of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Without a doubt. The West knows that this region, this region within Syria, is the heart and soul of Al-Qaeda in Syria. But Assad is killing his own people. He's not fighting Al-Qaeda when he drops bombs, when airstrikes hit Idlib, when Syrian airplanes hit Idlib, Syrians are killing their own people. When the Americans are doing it, they're fighting terrorism. One more point I want to make on Idlib. Find me a Western journalist in Idlib today. Tell me, show me, bring one.
I'll tell you something, when that happened in Idlib, the Twitter accounts of the Al-Qaeda affiliates in the Khan Shaykhun started saying, we can provide protection for any media outlet that wants to come.
Exactly right.
They never said we provide protection for UN investigators. Never.
Never. Media. So exactly right. And that's the point I want to make. Prior to the chemical attack in Syria, not one Western journalist would have survived 5 minutes in Idlib. After chemical attack, we welcome you with open arms and we guarantee your safety. That is what we were told. Let me just go back. I'm going to show you. Sorry, I just want to show this first. Now, I took a screenshot of this on my phone because I found it quite funny. The Daily Telegraph had put this picture of the area of the impact site, and this is the photo that we showed before with the munitions set. Now this is Idlib. Why I put this picture up is I want to show you this. This banner exists all over Idlib, and for anybody that reads Arabic, it says "Alaykum bi-jihad." Wow. Does anyone know what that means? Jihad is obligatory upon you.
Okay.
That is the slogan of the people of Idlib. The people who occupy Idlib. But of course the Daily Telegraph doesn't know. So we just put it there because there's this. This is more powerful than this. This is only powerful in Australia.
Yeah.
Wow. Witness for the prosecution. Let's keep going. This guy here. Dr. Shajul Islam.
What's the last clown in Idlib?
Absolutely. So here's a guy, when the chemical report first came out in Syria, this was the main guy on BBC, MSNBC, CNN, all the major news outlets, saying that he had treated people for sarin gas attacks. This was the guy, and you can see there, no one is doing anything to stop these gas offences. This was one of the first people to call upon US intervention after this recent chemical attack.
British Bangladeshi.
Who is a British Bangladeshi? Yeah. You know too much about him, Jay, I don't know. Is he credible? No. Now, if we were in a court of law and we had a witness, I'd love to cross-examine this bloke. This is a man wanted for terror crimes in the UK. He is wanted for terror crimes in the UK. In the UK, he's a terrorist. In Syria, he's a freedom fighter. He's a man of peace. He's a credible doctor. White helmets. Going back to now, I know they're an Oscar-winning organisation. Wow. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to skim through this quickly, but we know who the white helmets are. We know they're a front for Al-Qaeda. We know they're financed and funded by the UK and the US. It's there for everyone to see. It's not hidden. They are a front for Al-Qaeda. Here's a couple of images put together. So, how credible are the white helmets? So this is, again, remember that this is the main source for the United States intelligence report released on the 11th of April. Our sources on the ground. This is one of their sources, tomato. Barbecue, I don't know, but these guys are not credible sources. You can see there, they are notorious for recycling old photos. 100%. You can go online, as I said, put in white helmets exposed, you will see this for yourself. You see, that's a video on the right-hand side. I've seen that video, probably many of you have as well, where they execute people, and magically the white helmets are right there afterwards to collect the body. They only exist in Al-Qaeda areas, without a doubt.
And ISIS recently as well.
Recently and ISIS.
And Raqqa as well.
And then I have a video which isn't publicized of them torturing someone, like white helmets torturing Syrian soldiers.
Put it up, I'm going to look for it.
Okay.
I'll use it in my next presentation. But you will see that is a good point, because there are videos on there and you will see, and I guarantee you this, go online and have a look. You will see in white helmet bunkers, you will see flags representing Daesh, you will see flags representing Al-Qaeda, you will see all this material in white helmet. These guys are supposed to be NGOs, non-government organisations. These guys are supposed to be a peaceful organisation, there to treat the wounded and the people of Syria. What about this guy? This is a video, no joke, this is the screenshot from a video. Look what he says, finally we collect the bodies of the Shabiha and throw them in the trash. That's the impartial White Helmets organisation. Again, here you go, there's a nice collage of some of these guys that you can see, they all match up. That these people aren't as peaceful as we think they, or as we're told they are. Credibility. Here we go. We touched on this before. Sometimes when you stand before the world and tell the people that you're the foremost in the protection of peace and justice, that you're the leader of the free world, that your country stands for everything that is right, I say this, and this is fact, and I challenge anybody to discredit what I'm about to say. The United States government has used more chemical weapons in modern war history than any other armed force in the history of the world. Without a doubt. The United States government has been responsible for more civilian deaths in its modern history, in modern warfare, than any other nation, any other armed force in the world. When the United States kills civilians, they call them collateral damage. When the Syrians or the Iraqis or whoever else kills innocent civilians, they're butchers and terrorists. They have killed more innocent civilians than anybody else in the world. So if you want to sit on a moral high horse and tell the world what they can and can't do, then look at your history. I've given some examples there of what we know, some reported attacks. We know, and there's one there, I'm going to talk just briefly about it, Israel. Israel using white phosphorus in 2008, 2009 in Gaza. Now the Americans will tell you, and it is technically true, white phosphorus is not a banned substance. It is not a banned chemical substance. That is true. But it is banned as an incendiary weapon. White phosphorus, for those that know it and understand it, yeah, so it's used sometimes as a form of a tear gas or to light up an area. However, white phosphorus burns the skin from the outside in. It burns the skin from the outside in. It is not banned because it exists in the chemical arsenal of the United States and Israel, but it does not exist in the chemical arsenal of Russia, China, or anybody else. So technically, white phosphorus is not a banned chemical substance, but it has the same effect.
Yes.
And I put them there, and I haven't given you the civilian casualty numbers because I want people to go online and see for themselves. Have a look, research these incidents for yourselves, and look at the civilian casualties and the women and the babies that were killed. Because the babies of Syria are not more important than the babies of Palestine. And they're not more important than the babies of Moscow. And they're not more important than the babies of Gaza. Because every soldier in this world deserves the same freedom and the same rights. And it doesn't matter who drops those chemical weapons.
Since 1776, the US has only not been at war with itself, its neighbours, its First Nations or anybody for just 16 years. You can go and check that out.
Yeah.
So 16 years have they ever been at peace?
That's correct. So I saw that figure, 222 years out of a 239-year calendar history. So since 1776, 93% of their time they've been at war in some way, shape or form. Now here's the other point I want to make. And we touched on this before, and everybody in this room probably knows. The US, the West and their regional allies continue to illegally fund, arm and train rebels in Syria. There is no legal justification for that. Absolutely none whatsoever. Susie did a great job in showing the UN Charter, Section 4, quite clear. It is illegal. And to any civilized nation or a nation that calls itself civilized, I say this: if you had not funded, if you had not equipped these armed insurgents in Syria, would the civilian death toll be what it is today? You quite clearly have the power today to stop what's happening in Syria by cutting off the arms supply and the training to the armed insurgents in Syria. Let me put it this way. We as Australians, how would we feel if the Indonesians decided tomorrow that they were going to select a group of Australians in Australia, fund them, arm them, equip them with whatever they wanted in an uprising against the Australian government? How would that sit in our society today? And if it is not okay for Australia, why is it okay in Syria? If you don't believe me, again, open source media. We're going to go the route of the Americans. US-made tow missile. ISIS. How does that work? I'm just asking a question. I'm not alleging that the US delivered those shipments or whatever. I'm just saying, how does a US-made
They accidentally dropped
end
them.
up in the hands of ISIS?
They accidentally dropped them over ISIS.
Absolutely.
Along with the training manuals.
Let's go back. That's a good point. Now, I said a few times early on, and I emphasised the word no doubt. The reason why I emphasise the word no doubt, and again, I challenge anybody in this room or listening to this on YouTube or whatever social media platform, go back and look at the language used by the United States and its allies pre-Iraq, and you will see, without a doubt, and I can say it to you now, there is no doubt Saddam Hussein has chemicals of mass destruction. There can be no doubt Iraq is in possession of WMDs. The same language, Blair, Howard, Bush, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. I challenge anybody. Look at their language and you will see it is the exact same language. There is no doubt. And do we remember when Colin Powell sat in the UN and he held a vial of anthrax and told us that Saddam Hussein had vast amounts of that? Well, we haven't seen it till this day. So I put that up there because I think it summarises that point quite clearly. Remember Iraq and remember what they're saying to us today. Another point on credibility, and I think this is very important to highlight as well. WikiLeaks was one of Donald Trump's favourite things in the lead up to the presidential election. In fact, you can go online again and you'll see he stood before the people and he said, WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks. Because WikiLeaks had exposed Hillary Clinton. But today, we have the CIA coming out and saying that the WikiLeaks and organisations like WikiLeaks are terrorist groups. Go figure.
Yes.
This is why. Because WikiLeaks exposed the American agenda in Syria. Hillary Clinton, I've got to thank her for being so stupid, to be honest, because the very fact that she had a personal server in her home gave WikiLeaks access to be able to go in and reveal this type of information. Clinton was hell-bent, and I don't think anything has changed today. The jockey might have changed, the horse is still the same. It's exactly the same. They are hell-bent on destroying Syria for whatever reason. There's multiple theories. I don't want to go into the theories of why. But what I'm saying is that when we take evidence, so to speak, from the US, then we have to question its credibility based on this type of information that we know of. Now, I use this chart. It's a little bit old because all of you, or many of you, would know that that group right up there does not exist anymore. And if it does, it's pretty small. But I want to highlight something, and you'll see why in a second. So the group here have been invited by the Syrians legally to assist and aid in their war on terror. The guys on this side who finance, fund and equip these guys have not been. So when we talk about motive and agenda, you can see on which side the West sits and on which side the others sit. Now Israel there is in the middle. I would absolutely bank on the fact that Israel sits all over there. The whole thing. Now I showed that for a reason. And I've deliberately used the old FSA flag because I want you to see this. This is the FSA leader, right? There with Robert Ford, who was the former ambassador to Syria. This is the same guy here. This is the same guy in discussions with the head of ISIS. It is the same organisation and never be fooled. We talk about double standards, and I thought this was brilliant. I don't know who that is. I should have looked at it, but whoever did that it's absolutely brilliant.
It looks like that.
Because after September 11, Al-Qaeda were the bad guys all over the world. These guys, and they still are, let's not sway away from the fact that Al-Qaeda are hell-bent on destroying Western civilization, ideals, etc., and establishing whatever it is, their radical agenda. But I thought this is brilliant, because in the West, when they attack the West, they are Al-Qaeda. When they're pumped out in Syria, they become the Free Syrian Army, or whatever rebel faction they call themselves today. This is something else I wanted to show. Mr. McCain, one of the most prominent voices in the US Republican Party today, probably one of the biggest warmongers. Mr. McCain and just remember this guy's face for me. Right, this guy, ISIS, this guy known ISIS. This guy's actually in a number of videos you can go online and see him, where he's decapitating people. Met with John McCain. This guy was a moderate rebel in 2011. Moderate rebel, that's what they said. Right? Same guy, remember this guy's face? In talks again, John McCain, Free Syrian flag. Bingo. This guy is that guy, is that guy, is this guy, who's that guy.
Wow.
Right?
Good on you.
That is the same. Do not for a second believe that they are disconnected from each other. And if that doesn't show, and again I'll show this on the point of credibility, this is a guy who has been the most probably vocal voice in the United States in a war on Syria. John McCain meeting with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Wow.
So, I'm going to conclude on this point. So, going back to the very beginning, if we think about justice and what justice is, and the administration of justice, in that we would expect as citizens in any society or in any legal system to go through a fair and just process before being found guilty by a jury of our peers or by a government or by a court of law. Has justice been administered in the recent attack or the allegations made against Syria? has the United States government presented to us? Does anybody in this room believe that the burden of proof has been met by the United States with respect to Khan Shaykhur? Does anybody in this room credibly believe that, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it was Syria that perpetrated that attack? And here's a funny thought that I want to share. And the Russians were the best, I guess, at this from the very start. Because while everybody was banging on about unilateral strikes and Syria's a bad guy, Assad's a bad guy, the Russians were the first to say, and what a thought, and it's been drowned out by everything else, let's have an independent, fair, impartial investigation, and at the conclusion of that investigation, let's make a decision. That is probably the most logical thing I've heard, but unfortunately, in the Western media, or all over the world, in the court of public opinion, that is being erased from people's minds. That's it from me, and I hope, from my perspective,